Hi, my name's Ed Triplett, and in this tutorial video I'm going to be walking you through the process of doing a studio setup for scanning objects using a technology called photogrammetry. Photogrammetry, to give you a very quick introduction, is a passive scanning process that allows the light that is coming, that is illuminating an object to be received by a camera. And when the object itself is shot from different angles and we mask out all of the area around it, photogrammetry is going to be able to take those two-dimensional images and create a 3D model from it. Okay, so I don't want to go too far into the technicality of how the triangulation works to create these things, but I do want to go through the best practices of how you get good results through this technique. Okay, so we're really going to learn through doing. This particular setup you see, as I mentioned, there is a light box here. We also have a turntable, which I can spin manually. We have an object that is a three-dimensional sculptural object that we want to use to do our test. You may have objects from the museum or from our touch collection, for instance, that you're going to use. But for today, we're just going to have this kind of silly planter that's here that we're going to use instead. Okay, so the technology we're going to use, the device I should say that we're going to use, is this camera. This camera is called a Sony A7R4. It's a 60 megapixel camera. So at its highest resolution, we're going to be capturing quite large images. We're going to be capturing them in as RAW, R-A-W, RAW. Also raw files, but also we're going to be converting those files into a file format that preserves as much information per pixel as possible. And that's something we'll walk through in the second video where we talk about processing. So we're going to be capturing raw images. We're also going to try to control our exposure. Okay, so to be very clear about this, the best way to get good results from photogrammetry is to have all of your photos have the same exposure, so that they're going to match the pixel color value of this little dot right here is going to be the same on this photo, that photo, this photo, that photo, right? If we leave, what that means is if we put on any of the easy buttons, right, we leave anything on automatic, it's going to what's called meter off of, and that means essentially find out how much light is on that object, and it will change the exposure for every single photograph. We don't want that. So that means we're going to be, very early on, we're going to be explaining how to use a DSLR camera in the manual setting, right? Which means that you're going to be able to control that exposure. So what goes into exposure? In a very short way of putting this, there's 3 but really 5 variables that you need to be thinking about. Okay, so the exposure is how much light is going to be hitting that sensor. Okay, so the first thing that's going to affect your exposure is what's called ISO. Okay, ISO used to be known as film speed when we were using film, but it essentially controls how sensitive the sensor on the camera is going to be. And so what you want to do as a rule of thumb is that number should not go high. Okay, so we want ideally to be at 100 ISO. Okay, so this is one of those easy settings. You're going to put it on ISO 100 and leave it there. Okay, so the reason for that, main reason, is if you start pulling that number up, it's going to make the sensor more sensitive. And that's going to lead to noise. And noise is basically garbage data. So in order to really, really quickly get as much information as possible and be super sensitive, it basically is going to guess at the colors that it's looking at and try to imprint them onto the file, right? Instead, we want what's actually on here as much as possible to be captured. And that means a low ISO. So, and essentially not very sensitive ISO. So I'll go over how to do that on this camera. The second thing is going to be your shutter speed. Shutter speed simply means there is a shutter on the camera that is going to be closed whenever you're not taking a picture, and then it will open briefly and close just as quickly. So the amount of time that is open or closed is controlled by that. What we're talking about as a nice rule of thumb is if you're going to be using a handheld camera and you're not going to be using a flash, the way to avoid camera shake, I think, is whether it's not true. You mean whether you're using a flash or not, you really don't want to be if you're going to be handheld and not on a tripod as you see here, you don't want to be any slower than 1/60th of a second. Okay, that's pretty fast, but that's a nice kind of, let's call it not a hard rule, but a good guideline. Okay, so that's shutter speed. Now the third thing is what's known as either f-stop or aperture. I tend to say aperture, but the aperture is essentially how wide does that shutter open, right? Is it kind of a pinhole, or is it kind of large when the shutter goes off? The reason that you'd think, okay, well, why do you actually have to do that? The point for your aperture is to control focal length. Okay, so if you have an aperture that is wide open, okay, it means the light's going to hit it very quickly, but it will only capture what you've focused on in a narrow area, sort of towards the camera and away from the camera, from that focal point. So let's say you focus right on the tip of the nose. If you have a very large aperture, so essentially a small number, something like 1.4, only the nose will be in focus, and you'll have this beautiful kind of blurring background. Let's say that's sometimes called bokeh. Beautiful photographs, but terrible for photogrammetry, because we're trying to get everything in the object in focus as much as we possibly can. So all the way through the object should be in focus. That means we're going to be using an f-stop around f8 and higher if we can. And the way to make this all work now, before we get to focus being maybe our fourth variable that we need to think about, before we get to that, we still need to think about, okay, in this situation that I'm describing, I'm saying you have to have a not very sensitive ISO. Okay, so something like 100 is where we're going to leave it. We're also going to be opening and closing the shutter fairly quickly, theoretically, if we were handheld. But then the other, and so there's not much lag going in that way. And then the third variable is the aperture is also going to be stopped way down to pretty small, so that we have a large kind of focal length. Now, all of that means that you need a ton of light to be available and hitting this object, at least a good amount, for that to work. Okay, now if we put things on the tripod, we really don't have to, make too much effort in worrying about our shutter speed. So since that one variable is something that we don't really have to think about as much, we're going to keep our aperture kind of small, and then we're going to put it on the tripod and allow that, whatever we need for that shutter speed. Another problem that we're going to introduce, because we keep introducing problems, is the fact that the light that you're seeing here is a particular temperature. Okay, so we control the temperature, the blue or the coolness or warmness of the white areas, for instance this box, using what's called white balance. Okay, so we don't want that on automatic, so we're going to set our white balance to whatever is correct for the most prominent light source, let's say. And in this case, the most prominent light source we're going to use is this really big flash. So when we go to our white balance settings, the one we're looking for is the one, as you kind of scroll down in the Sony, you'll see one that says specifically for flashes. Okay, so the temperature of this particular flash is pretty cool. It's actually maybe even a little bit cooler than outdoor light, okay, which is a little bit bluer. You can kind of see it in the background here in comparison to this nice tungsten yellow light that you see over in the background. So we're going to set that white balance to flash compensation. which is a color setting, and just leave it there. Okay, so those are the things that we're really going to work on primarily with exposure and white balance. So let's turn on the, I want to show you how to turn on the light tet really quick. There's a plug over here in the bottom, top left-hand corner. And the only way to make it actually work, since it does not have a switch, is to plug it in. Okay, so right up here, you'll see this round outlet right here. Okay, so now what you may have noticed is that the scene is very different now, and I've left the camera that is recording this, I've left the settings on manual. So you didn't notice that if I had left this on automatic, it was focusing on this area that suddenly became light. What would have happened is all of this area would have stopped down, for instance, the aperture, and I would have been thrown into super darkness, so that it was actually focusing more on the metering for this scene rather than me. Okay, so that's just something to think a little bit about, how that works. So what I'll do is I'll get behind the camera in the next section here and show you just kind of what that looks like. Okay, here I am looking through at the scene. We are currently at 1/60th of a second. Think of this doesn't really work as intuitively when you're talking about video, but just think about these as your exposure settings. On the front, there are several dials on the camera. If you put your finger near the shutter release, as you kind of grip the camera, your index finger will be able to make some changes, and that will affect your aperture. I'm going to step it down to f8, f9, f10, f11, etc., 13, 14, 16, okay? So those numbers that get higher mean that the f-stop is getting, and the aperture is getting smaller, okay? So I'm going to pull that back and notice that now my exposure is getting a little bit more even. Now I'm also blowing out the object a little bit. So if I leave it right about at f8 again, we're fine. Now let's pretend we're going to be shooting this as a photo instead of a video. There's a second dial in the back of the camera where your thumb would be if your index finger is on the shutter. I'll show you these shortly, so don't worry. But I'm going to start turning that one up, and now I'm saying 1/100th of a second, 1/25th of a second. Okay, 200th of a second. All right, that means that it's simulating what would happen if you took that photo with those particular settings. Now this is at 1/500th of a setting, and you can see the way that the exposure is changing. Okay, I'm going to leave that at 160 for now. This is going to be fine. And I want to show you a couple of other things. I'm going to, in the back of the camera, there's an FN button, stands for function. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to make a change to my ISO. Okay, so right now my ISO is pretty high, higher than you would for still photography in the Photogrammetry project. It's at 800 right now. But I'll show you the reason I'm at 800 is because with this current settings I have, I'm not letting in a lot of light. So I need it to be extra sensitive. So I'm going to keep dialing this down. And I'll show you, this is what it would look like at 100 ISO. Okay, so probably not detecting a whole lot here, but this is kind of our ideal ISO setting. So you can see we really do need a lot of light. And if I pull this way, way up, I'm going to go up to a huge number here. You might start noticing some film grain here. Okay, so this is a monster number. This is 80,000 ISO right here. So you might be noticing some noise and things like that. Okay, I wanted to show you the way that worked. I'm going to go back down here to 800. And I think my last thing I wanted to show you here is I'm going to also be showing a little bit, and I hope I can demonstrate this. Actually, I might add a little bit more light really quickly here. I'm going to turn the shutter speed and let a little bit more light in so you can kind of see these areas where there's the table in particular, you can see that there's some shininess on that table. So this particular lens has a polarizing filter, so like a little dial that that's right on the edge. And as I spin that dial, notice the shininess kind of disappear and then come back as I keep turning it, right? You can kind of see that, okay? So what we want to do is dial this down until we see as little shine as possible, okay? So that's something we'll do just to kind of demonstrate how that works. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is move the camera to right behind the SLR camera that you see here that's going to take our photos. We're going to try that, and we'll be right back. The next thing I want to show you all is another view from behind the camera so you can get to know this particular Sony camera and the way that it works. Right now I have my ISO cranked up a little bit so that I can have a small aperture, which means that I'm trying to get just a little bit blurry, I think, in the distance here, but I think you'll get the idea. I really do want to make sure that you can really see everything that's going on in the camera quite well. So the first thing I want to do is show you how to turn it on. This is a quick switch. You can see right where my finger is here. There's a switch from off to on. I've pulled out. You can pull out the the viewer so that we have it on live mode and you can see it that way. If you want to take a picture, you're going to be using this shutter release right here. Another useful thing about the shutter release is if you push it down halfway without actually clicking it, you can also make sure that you focus. Now, the only way that the autofocus like that will work correctly is if you look at the left-hand side right here by the barrel of the lens. You should be able to see a switch, and it's kind of tucked away down here, but you can switch it on and off from manual to automatic. Okay, if you want to see that more clearly, we can kind of pull the camera down and show what that looks like right here. Okay, so you can kind of see it right here. Right now it's on auto, that's manual. Okay, so we'll switch that back. We'll go back to our previous position. All right, so we're back in position, and I want to be able to make sure that everything is clear for you all. So we've gone over turning it on. We've got, if you ever see the view kind of disappear, or just go ahead and give that a half press, like don't click it all the way. I'll take a picture just so you know what that's going to look and sound like. Click it down the whole way and that'll go off. Okay, so I actually just held it too hard and took 2 pictures. That's fine. The other thing I wanted to show you all is where all of these other aperture, shutter speed, that kind of thing are. So right in the front right there is a dial. I am now going from f16 to f18, f20. This is my aperture, okay, right up here. Okay, so that's right by the trigger in the front right there. Okay, and I'll bring this back. This dial right here, that's going to control your shutter speed. So right now it's at 0.6 seconds, so really, really slow. I'm going to pull that all the way down, and you can see how that changes my exposure. Okay, so I'll leave that there for now. If I want to change the ISO, if you look, there's a dial back here that handles all of the very complicated settings for this particular camera. Sony is pretty famous for having really detailed menus. But the main thing that you need to know is just that you can do some things like turning the wheel to make selections. But if you just click the wheel, that will open up ISO. And now when you spin the wheel, you're going to select a different ISO. Again, this is just to be absolutely certain. When you all get to the camera, it should already be on 100. So you should be able to see ISO 100 right there when you first get to the computer or to the camera. So That one you shouldn't have to mess too much with. Okay, another thing that you do want to turn on is our flash. And this Wistro ring flash is currently off. What you need to make sure that you have is this cord is, it's a little tricky, but this needs to be tied or attached to the right hand side. There's a little door that opens here, and it should already be set up, but you want that to be connected so that when the shutter goes off, that the flash also goes off. So I'm going to hold down this on/off button and turn it on, and you should be seeing right here that it says 1/2. Okay, so that's 1/2 of the full power of the flash. Okay, so to show you what that actually looks like when you get it on, when you hit the shutter, I'm going to just do one quick shot. Right, so you probably saw that. There was a quick flash. One thing to know about this is the flash is only so fast. It's not as fast as your shutter. If you take your shutter for any reason to be any slower than 1/160th of a second, okay, not 60, remember that was our handheld number, but 1/160th, then you're going to actually be shooting the shutter faster than your flash, and only half of the image is going to have flash and half of it will not. Okay, it's just a nice important rule for you to remember. Okay, so here we are. We have the object in focus. We are at f/16, so that's a really small aperture, so just about everything should be in focus, but we need to compensate for the amount of light that the flash is going to give off. Okay, so what that means is I need to speed up that shutter. Okay, and remembering that 1/60th is my final option, I'm going to go straight to 1/60th and know that I can always work backwards, right? So I can always slow it down, but I can't speed it up from there. So let me take a quick, hold it down halfway to make sure that I'm focused, and do one quick shot. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is right down here at the very bottom, there should be, hopefully you can see this, there's a little button that has a little triangle arrow on it, like a play button. We're going to click on that one. And that will show me my last photograph. Okay, I'm looking at this and saying, it looks okay. That isn't too bad. One of the things you'll notice is the flash has gotten rid of, fortunately, all of those shadows. We don't want those shadows. We want what's actually in there. So what I'm going to do is really quickly, if I want to change the display, there's a wheel up here. I'm going to push the display forward. And just by hitting it once, I'm seeing all of these histogram values, right? If one of these is buried all the way to the left, to the left, then you're going to be underexposed. If they're pushed too far to the right, then you're overexposed. Okay, so right here, the fact that they're in the middle, this isn't bad. One other thing that I've done, if I'm going to go back to, let me click that again. I'm going to hit the display button just so I can see the image again. One thing I want to do is make sure that I don't have any of the corners of the light box in the image. So if you can, it's always easier to mask things out when you don't have those sides in there, okay? Because they're stuff that the software wants to grab hold of. Okay, so we've adjusted our aperture, our ISO, our shutter speed. What's left? Okay, the last one is going to be your white balance. So to control the white balance, above the middle dial, right here where it says function, it's FN. I'm going to click on that. Okay, hold on just a moment. So what I'm going to do is click on the function button, and something went a little off there. I'm not sure what I touched. We're going to go right over here. You can see some of these menus, and you can move them back and forth. Go to your white balance, check that, and you can see right at the very beginning, it might be on something like auto. You don't want auto. This would be daylight. Shade, okay, just so you can see what this looks like. I'm gonna select shade really quick, and I'm just gonna slow down so you can see what the view looks like when I make changes here. So I'm gonna go to white balance, click on that again. Now that's shade, and shade is gonna be cooler, all right? And daylight is it's going to be, if it's compensating for daylight like this, it's going to make things bluer, okay? And it looks like the light in the light box is not really a good comparison to daylight temperature. Okay, so what we're going to do is keep going down, and you can see incandescent, right? So if I was doing this with yellow lights, it's trying to counteract that by making everything blue. I'm going to keep moving down, and right about there, you see this is the flash compensation. That's the one that in some of my tests, this has turned out pretty well. Now this is a little bit warm, but remember when it gets hit with the flash, that's a cooler light, and that should really fix things. Okay, so let's select that. And I'm going to then go back, and I'm going to slow this way down to 1/160th of a second. Okay, another thing to know is if you turn the camera off and on, these settings may change. They probably will change. So you just want to make sure if you're in the middle of a shoot that you don't necessarily turn it on and off a lot, or just be sure and even write down these settings so that you can double check them. Okay, so let me get ready for my very first shot. I should have mentioned this early, but it will be on manual no matter what. So you'll see the little M is going to be pointed this direction. So that's fine. I'm going to hold this down halfway. Right now, I believe I'm still on automatic automatic focus. So I'm going to take my first photo, and I'm just going to do a quick preview of it. That looks pretty good. Okay, so once I've decided that all these settings are correct, I'm going to continue to shoot. Okay, so what you'll see here, I'm not going to touch the object, but you can see I like to put the 3 prongs for this particular turntable towards the front, so that I know that was where I began. And I'm going to start by just going to each of these black marks, hold down the shutter, take a picture. See, I had my hand in the photo when I did that. I can just pop this out. I can either do a thumbs down and take a picture to make sure I know not to use that previous photo, or I can just be more careful in the future. Okay, so I'll take around just like this. Now, again, once you have all of your settings done, this part is super fast. So I'm going to speed this up. Okay, so that's one full turn. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to raise this camera up and point it down at as close to 45 degrees as I possibly can, and I'll show you that setup in just a moment. All right, now that we have the tripod lifted up, all I did is unscrew the 3 legs and raise it up a little bit further. I now kind of have a feeling that I'm going to be able to be about 45 degrees from the top of the object. In order to do that with this particular tripod, there's a dial in the back that makes it super easy. I'm going to, again, I have to remember that my settings from before are going to remain the same, 1/60th of a second, but I can't see through the viewer, so to make it easier for you all to see, I'm going to slow down that shutter so that I can show you all how to make sure that you get the object into view. So that's to twist this down. I'm going to keep twisting, and I may need to pick up. Now, when you lift this, please be careful. It is pretty heavy. You're going to lift up the entire object and put one hand underneath the camera if you can. Okay, so I'm going to pull that back, and then I might just turn these dials a little bit and just have a look at my composition. Make sure the entire object is in view if you can. Now, you might need to be pretty far back in order to make that work if you have a larger object. But for this one, it seems okay. Now, just to test, what I'm going to do is have a quick seat here and just give it a spin. And I can see right there that the top of those laurel leaves are out of the frame. Okay, so I can try to fix that by trying to get this a little bit more central, but more than likely what I need to do is tilt the camera up a little bit and move back. All right, I'm going to move back. Now I don't want to move too much, because the further I move from the object, the less that the flash is going to have an effect, and then I won't have this set of photos match my previous set. Okay, so I've got a new position here. I'm going to try that again. And as long as that top of that doesn't go out of frame, we're okay. Okay, now that I have the position set up, I'm trying to give you guys a slightly better view of everything. I need to remember that when I tried to make sure that this was all in frame, that I changed my shutter speed. So what I want to do very quickly here is go all the way back to 1/60th of a second. 1/160th of a second, I should say, 1/160. And I can just start the process just as we did before and just do another full circle. Okay, that completes that full circle. The next thing that we're going to do is bring the camera back down to a lower position, as we did before, and we're going to turn the object on its side, and we're going to do another round this way so that we get the top and the bottom of the object. All right, I now have the camera back low again, and I'm just going to begin by turning the three little lines back to meeting each other. And I'm going to turn this object. Now again, if this is a museum object, you're going to be handling this much more carefully than this thing, which is worth nothing. You're also probably going to be doing something like maybe you need to place some bean bags underneath something soft. For now, this object is going to work just fine if I place it about like this. Okay, so I'm remembering that this is kind of my low, the bottom of the object, right, is kind of even with this, because my next one I'm going to do is going to be 90 degrees from that. Okay, so I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to make sure as I've got my shutter speed turned up again, just so that I can, to 1/6 of a second, just so that I can see and make a quick spin of this thing. I might even speed that up just a little bit more so I can really see what's going on. Okay, and as I spin, I want to make sure that it doesn't go out of view. Not bad. Okay, I'm going to actually lower the angle just a little bit to make absolutely sure that I'm getting everything I need. And I'm going to be shooting right into that. That's the key part, okay? So you don't want to be quite so violent as I am, but rotate it to where it needs to be. This is going to be my first shot. Now, because I'm going to really concentrate on getting the bottom really well, I'm going to take additional photos. So let me, to explain that, I need to make sure that my shutter speed is back to 1/60th. Okay, so I'm going to do that. 1/160th, I should say. Okay, here we are. I'm going to take my first picture. And what I'm going to do is, instead of going a full turn for each black mark, I'm going to go halfway between the black marks. Okay, so I'm going to go from here to here. And the reason for this is just an area that has not really been photographed well, and I want to make absolutely sure that we have enough detail on this area and that it's going to be combining with things that we already have shot. Okay, so parts like this. Okay, the other effect of this is it's going to be helping us with things that we might have missed, like the under parts of ears and things like that. Now, if you have an object that has what I call a lot of occlusions, so objects that, maybe appendages that come out and with various angles will obscure other parts of the object, then you might want to just get a handful of additional photos to make absolutely sure that you're getting the undersides of those objects if you can. Okay, so I'm pretty sure I shot that photo. I'm going to go on to my next one. And this isn't entirely an exact science at this stage. You're just wanting to make absolutely sure that you're getting everything. And when the base is finally completely out of view, now you can switch to just simply going to full turns. Okay, but now that's going to change once you get to the point where you're seeing some of the top. So I'm going to go to a half turn now. And for the rest, you only got a few options to do half turns. And what this is doing is making absolutely sure that this really difficult area, now we're going to be dealing with masks, which is one of the reasons that I chose this object for the tutorial. They're going to have hollow spaces. And in order to get those hollow spaces, we just need a few additional photos from as many possible angles as we can, so we don't lose track of those. And each time as I hold it down, I'm just going to be really conservative here. I'm making sure that I hold down the shutter halfway so that I'm focusing every time. And I'm going to keep doing these half turns until I can't see the top anymore. Okay, I can just barely see the top now. So if I really want to, I can do, I'm just going to do one more. Full turns for a bit. But then when I come around again, and now we're starting to see the underside again. Yeah, we didn't get to do, I say full turns for very long there, because we still want to make sure that we get it on the opposite end as well. Okay, because I began looking straight down at the bottom. Great. Okay, and that's my last one for this one. Next thing I need to do is just turn it 90 degrees. We're going to do one more pass. Now, just in case, I'm going to do another quick test and slow down my shutter so I can see it. And I'm just going to give this a quick, slow spin to make absolutely sure that it never disappears from the frame. Yeah, it looks like it's going to do just fine. Great. Okay, so we're going to start here again. I'm going to switch again. Remember, I've got to slow down that shutter to 1/160th. And we're going to do it again. Okay, right in here when I'm looking straight down, since I know that that's an easily occluded area, I'm just going to take a few additional photos right in here. I know that's hard to get. Okay, so I took 4 photos right in that area, and I think that should probably be a little bit like overkill, but better safe than sorry. The photos are cheap. So if we don't need them, we'll throw them out. That was a full turn. And we're just going to finish up with our last half turns, and then we'll be done with our object shooting. All right, so that's the end of that. If I were going to be really careful with this process, I would do one more thing, which I'm going to show you. I'm going to raise the camera up. I probably should have done this when I already had the camera up, but it's really okay as it is now. I'm going to turn the object back onto its normal pedestal, because this is the orientation that I want for the whole object. And what I want to do is add a scale bar, and then the final thing I'll do is take a single photo of what's called a color card in case I need to adjust the colors for the entire set. So if we'll pause for a moment, I'm going to raise the camera back up and we'll take that photo. Okay, as a last piece of cleanup, one of the things that we're going to do is add a scale bar into the whole scene. Now, we didn't need to have this kind of in our way the entire time. We're going to use these and mask it out from some of the photographs later. And we just need a handful of images where this is really visible. So I know from doing this before that I need to get it fairly close to the front here. And I just need this to be in a minimum of 3 to 4 photos. I'm going to try to do a few more, but I'm going to give that a quick turn. And I'm going to change make sure that I'm on 1/60th of a second. So you can kind of see it here. That's what I'm looking at. Okay, we're now going to have the scale bar in there. Changing it back to 1/160th. Okay, and I'm going to take one quick shot. And I'm just going to move it a little bit so that I'm triangulating these things, but I'm not losing any part of it, because unlike the object, from this distance, the scale bar will go out of frame. So if I just go back and look at that previous photo, yeah, I can see I'm really close to losing it, but I have just a little bit further I can go, and I can take one more photo like that. And I might even go back to the initial and then do just a handful going this way as well. Now this is probably overkill, but having just a few images of that scale bar is something you'll like to have, okay? Because photogrammetry by itself doesn't know the scale of the object, so we do need some known coordinates in there. So that's fine. We're going to end on that one. I can just go ahead and take this off, and I'll remove the object. Well, I can leave the object in. And I'm going to put my color card just next to it. My color card comes, you'll see this with the in the studio. It's called the Spider Checker 24. Okay, it comes in a little sleeve. You can take that out. You can see the gray card here and the color bar here. I'm going to put that right there. And for this one, fortunately, I really only need one photo. So I want to make sure I can see that. Yeah, it's all in view. Okay, it's occluded just a little bit. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And that should do it. Just take one photo with the exact same settings I had before. And I check that photo. That's great. So now I have my color bar just right next to the object, shot exactly the same way as all my other photos. So that's going to conclude the shooting tutorial for photogrammetry. There are some other parts of this process. For instance, we're going to learn how to take the SD card out of this camera, plug it into an SD card reader. We're then going to transfer all of the files from a Sony, what's called RAW format, into a TIFF file format. And we're going to run all of our software for photogrammetry to create our 3D model in a second tutorial. But for now, this is the most important part, is getting all of these photos.